All right, now let's discuss this further then. We are now joined via Zoom by Dr Nthabiseng Moleko from the Commission for Gender Equality. She's the acting chairperson. Doctor, a warm welcome to you. Thank you so very much for joining us here on SABC News this afternoon.
Thank you, and a very good afternoon for having me.
You're most welcome. Now, you've conducted these oversight visits to several police stations. I mean, just hearing that clip, it does seem as though the situation is rather bleak, particularly for GBV violence. And it's not the first time that we hear these sort of complaints. Let's talk about, where, you've pointed to where the gender-based violence is high and essentially where the biggest problems are. And is it an issue of resource? What are the biggest red flags that you were able to pick up during this oversight visit?
You asked me what is the biggest red flag.
Yeah.
I want to be honest with you that the biggest red flag is that we have one rape too many. The biggest red flag is that we have sons, we have uncles, we have fathers, we have cousins who are raping and who are committing these offenses unabated. In fact, they're rising. I think the biggest red flag is that we are focusing on the response after the fact instead of preventing it and ensuring that the root problem is dealt with. And I think for me, we spoke about this at the end to say, South Africans, let's focus on where are these people coming from? Who are these perpetrators?
Yeah.
They are people in our communities. We've got to work on preventing so that we don't necessarily only focus on the response. We have put exact same emphasis, if not the same, I think, Flo, on all of the measures that need to be done. So I think in terms of red flags now, the biggest one is on pillar one. We've linked everything we've done to the outcomes of the National Strategic Plan, and we've said, let's put an emphasis on prevention. That's number one. Number two, accountability and coordination. That requires leadership. So we can talk about the data. I can tell you at length all the data, all the facts, all the findings. What is important now is what are we going to do with what we have found? So, of course, everyone knows on the ground what is happening. What we've said with SABC is that from the National Commissioner's Office, let's prioritize these targets, let's monitor these things regularly. And I know that South Africans are very tired, heartfelt, understood why. But I think that unless we deal with the root cause, but also on the other side, respond to the failures, we're going to see the same results. And I don't want to see another rape, another sexual offense. I also don't want to see cases inundated and not being dealt with through the court system and the justice system. I also don't want to see unfriendly victim rooms, unfriendly service from SABC, and those should be reported. So what we want is a change in the behavior. And so I think that's the aspect of accountability and coordination, because there is a plan from SABC. There's a GBV plan from the ERAP, which was that emergency response action plan from government. But that hasn't been executed by government, but also SABC isn't tailoring that down to the branch level, which is where the stations are. And you're not hearing anything of that. People are simply going on as usual. Task teams are announced nationally, but on the ground, you're not seeing that coming through. So I think that's where we need to put emphasis on. And I think that the report helps us to point to those problems, and I think that we want something done in relation to this. So we want to put an emphasis on accountability and improved coordination so that you see results across the board.
Yeah, and Doctor, you talk about the root problem, which is very important in that when we're not dealing with the root problem, I assume then that the problem manifests and becomes bigger. So, as I was reading in the intro there, I was talking about the fact that, a lot of the cases are then withdrawn, and what that means is that there's no repercussions, so people are not getting arrested. So that means that the problem persists. It also means that those perpetrators of GBV, and I will call them criminals, those criminals see that there are no repercussions, and so they can continue in that way, and the pattern continues. I mean, let's talk about this pattern that is caused really by the fact that we're not actually addressing the root cause of the problem.
Yes. So let's look at what has been found by the report and what we have seen. Number one, a large number of withdrawals of cases across the board. So when we look at the criminal statistics and the findings around the crime stats, what SABC has reported in that period is over an increase of 72% increase in rapes. That's not committed by SABC, it's committed by our South Africans or our fellow people recorded in the data. The increases cases are around rape, sexual offences, and related. Now, these are then taken through an affidavit. You make a statement, you go to SABC. They are supposed to use a D1 or a D7 sexual offence kit, depending on the age of the individual, to take the data and to take the forensic evidence either through a Tutuzela Care Centre and or through SABC. Yeah. What we've found is that because of that almost 5 to 3 year process, 5 months up to 3 years, where data is used and forensic data is analyzed at the forensic labs, the FSL labs, the delays there cause heavy pressure on the victim. They also put the case at whim, in that the prosecutor is unable to sometimes prove the case without the forensic evidence, and or the case is put in abeyance, and then that case is eventually, it has to be called back, and there's all kind of procedural aspects from the criminal court system, but that doesn't lead to a finalization of the case, and sometimes there's a complete withdrawal of the case or even an acquittal. So I'm saying these outcomes are not necessarily enforcing what you're saying, is that perpetrators think they can get away with what they have done, and it is a criminal act. There is Sexual Offences Act that they've violated, and or the Domestic Violence Act, and so unless that behavior is nipped in the bud through clinching prosecutions and convictions, and perpetrators know they will be convicted and prosecuted, we're unlikely to see a change in the behavior of victims, in addition to dealing with the root causes. The other aspect that you have touched on is what needs to be done in terms of prosecutions. In the report, we do detail that incidents, in order for prevention strategies, incidents need to not only be reported, but there's got to be a prevention strategy that is employed by the country. And that's a multi-sectoral approach. So it includes various portions of our country. But I think that we don't necessarily have enough resources and have put enough emphasis on this. And I think that what needs to happen is the Medical Research Council has done a report on prevention strategies. We don't have to do new work. What needs to be done now is implement some kind of a strategy to intervene in our communities and in our society to deal with the systemic drivers of sexual violence. So those systemic drivers and structural issues, unless we deal with them, we talk about them a lot in the economy. In our society, there's a lot of the same kind of structural issues and impediments that can prevent violence. One, very simple things. How do we build healthy relationships? How do we make sure that people have interpersonal strategies to strengthen non-violent responses? It seems our people don't have those skills. We've got to enable them to have those skills. How do we heal from trauma? A lot of the research, and even in our own findings, we found that there's a violent response basically coming from post-traumatic stress disorder. I'm not a psychologist, Flo, but I know that people that are psychologists will articulate this much better than me. But our research points to people are not healed. Our people need healing. We've got to go, if I can call it, massive healing that is needed across the country. Our people need to be healed from their trauma. The victims primarily need to be targeted. Our people have been taken. Generations have lost their childhood, their innocence, and we've got to make sure that our victims are healed, even the perpetrators, so that this is not repeated. So these are strategies that require different multi-sectoral approaches. Faith-based organizations have to partner with the SABC to prevent this. And it's not only SABC that can do this, because they're also maintaining law and order.
All right,
so
Doctor, let's leave it there.
Strategies which we can employ.
Doctor, thanks so very much for that. We appreciate your input. I hope that we can have more of these conversations with you with a lot more time to it. Thank you so very much for weighing in. That's Dr Nthabiseng Moleko from the Commission for Gender Equality. She's the acting chairperson there.